Okay.
11 o'clock.
Okay, I'd like to call to an order Clayton City Council meeting for February 19, 2019. Let the record reflect that all council members are present. If everyone will please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great. Our first item is consent calendar, and I do actually have one speaker card for item 3A. So why don't we take that comment first? Ms. Danaway? Which I think, item 3A is the minutes for our last two meetings. Right.
Ann Stanaway, 1553 Haviland Place, Clayton, California, 94517. Minutes from the special meeting. Notably sparse. From a 3-hour meeting, only one full page of conversation was noted. What really happened? Although no video was made, there were at least 8 smartphones in the room, one of which could have made a verbatim recording of the meeting, so that a full accounting of the subjects discussed could have been available for the public's edification. 2 items of interest were missing from the report. 1, a report on the council's deliberation and decision to eschew budgeting environmental impact studies on the theory that such studies just open an expensive can of worms for the city. Why encourage the Clayton Club to expand its patio services? That would require the city to spend on noise abatement studies. Interesting. The council cries that Clayton can't attract businesses. Now we know why. Second, report of the city manager's celebration of an efficient and hardworking staff that runs the city with a bare-bones complement of government employees. He expounded on how the city's no enforcement policy vis-a-vis illegal parking actually saves Clayton money. Councilman Diaz voiced his skepticism at the wisdom of such an approach, but received no support at all from the rest of the council. The public was not asked for their remarks on this part of the meeting. My records are complete. Can we say the same for those published by the city? With this in mind, just how does the city plan to defend itself from legal challenges based on comments made during council's open meetings? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other public comment? I don't have any other cards, but does anyone else want to comment on any of the consent calendar items? Seeing none, we'll close public comment.
I would move approval of the consent calendar.
Is there a second? Or any other discussion?
Is this the time we talk about the minutes, or?
The consent calendar items, item 3A, B, and C.
3A, B, and C.
I second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any other discussion on the consent calendar? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously. Then we'll move on to item 4, which is recognitions and presentations. We have none this time. And then item 5A, reports. We do not have a planning commission or trails and landscaping committee report this time, but city manager staff. Mr. Napper, please.
No report tonight.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll go on to city council reports. Why don't we start with council member Juan?
Myself and Councilmember Diaz attended the budget subcommittee meeting. We'll see the results of that here, along with Mr. Mazzuno's diligent work. I completed my orientation with some of the department heads for the rest of the city, and that has been going on for the past several weeks. So that was good. I was able to meet with everyone and talk with all the folks. That's it.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Pierce?
Yes, on the 7th of February, I had a Contra Costa Transportation Authority Administration and Planning Committee meeting where we went over primarily recent legislation and also authorized some contracts for some very important projects in East County and a couple of change orders as well. Also on the 7th, I attended along with the mayor's conference in the city of Concord, where we heard about some recycling challenges that the United States is facing now that China is not buying much of our recycling. And she and I have been working together to follow up with our garbage provider on some interesting things we have been hearing about that might be alternatives for recycling opportunities. On the 8th of February, I had Metropolitan Transportation Commission meetings. We had joint meetings with the Association of Bay Area Government, both the admin committee and the legislative committees. On the 13th, I met with some local residents working on an emergency preparations meeting to be held to look at reviving our neighborhood watch program. We are working on the agenda and confirming the speakers. The meeting will be, however, for the public on Monday evening, March 18th at 6:30 p.m. here in this room. It will be, I can't read my writing. It will be posted on the city website once we get that agenda finalized. And we intend to have representatives from County Fire, from CAL FIRE, from the County OES Department, Operations of Emergency Services, and others there to talk about what to do in an emergency, and then also to try to revive some of our neighborhood watch stuff that has gone kind of by the wayside over the last several years. So that will be taking place. On the 14th, I met with TransPAC, which is the Central County Transportation Partnership. We approved our budget for the second half of the year, did our mid-year budget review, as we're going to do here tonight. We added funding to a traffic monitoring project in the city of Walnut Creek, which will help to make the synchronization of traffic lights even better than it already is. We also approved a project management contract for the Monument I-680 bike pedestrian feasibility study. And we got a presentation on the I-680 HOV and express lane completion project, which is being done by the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And then on the 15th, I had a meeting with the Bay Area Regional Collaborative. We had an update from all 4 of the regional agencies on their goals and priorities going forward. We had a very lively 2-hour discussion on much of that. And the last week or so, I've been working very diligently on the concert scheduling flyer, which you will be getting in your March Pioneer. Howard has the concerts all booked, and we have a great lineup. We have 6 new bands this year. I am looking for banner sponsors and hat patrons to help us raise the money for the 2020 concerts. I will be sending letters out later this week, so if you're interested, please let me know, and I will put you on our list. And I want to give a big shout out to AJ Shapiro for putting together the claytonconcerts.com website and getting that up and running, and for posting everything on Facebook. He will have the full schedule up by the end of the week. He's bringing them out one concert at a time, just as a teaser. So concerts are coming, and there's a lot of work going on. So let us know if you want to help.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wolf?
Since the last council meeting, I met with, I went to the mayor's conference along with the mayor and the vice mayor. Also, I had a meeting with State Senator Glazer in his office, an orientation with him, got a chance to know him a bit. Met with several of my constituents after that, and did a bit of office work and email with several constituents. And I think that is all.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Diaz?
Just one meeting on the 11th. That was the budget subcommittee, and we will be hearing a presentation from the finance manager later this evening.
Great, thank you. And then for me, a couple things. I also attended the February 7th Mayor's Conference in Concord. I had my mayor's office hours on last Saturday at Couple Joe's, and I'll have next ones next Sunday from 2 to 4 p.m. near the Clayton museum. And then one other thing that does not need to be recorded in the minutes, but for work reasons, I attended on Valentine's Day, February 14, the mayor's economic forecast, which is between the Oakland mayor and San Francisco mayor. And it was apparently a historic event since we now have two female mayors from the two major cities. And in Mayor Libby Schaaf's words, it was the first time they had 4 ovaries on the stage. So it wasn't her words, but it was a historic event, given that they had
It sounds
both of
like
the
Libby.
cities. Yeah. So with that, we'll move on to other reports. I think we have Mr. Hayden here, who's going to report on the CCCTA. If you could please come up.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, staff. Yes, I wanted to report the results of our last monthly meeting in January with the Central Contra Costa Transit Authority, CCCTA it's called. There were 3 items of interest to Clayton residents at the meeting, and then one additional item that I'll explain at the end. First item is an announcement that the bus fares are going to be going up from $2 to $2.50 for cash riders. And this is the first fare increase since 2009. So you can imagine the district has been trying to do all it can to keep any need for increased rates down, but it's been now pushing 10 years since they have increased rates. And with the increased cost of maintenance and the idea that they'd like to push our cash customers to paperless alternatives, they felt that this was appropriate, and other agencies in the area are doing the same thing, other transit agencies. The next item was that in follow-up to that paper item reference, they're moving away from any cash or paper transaction for a couple of reasons. It's more efficient for the users to be able to use their Clipper cards and other products. It makes loading and unloading of the buses much more efficient. That's a real hang-up right now if there's a large number of passengers coming on that are attempting to pay for cash and asking for change and slowing down the loading of the buses. So they've seen real efficiencies being generated in other systems that have gone paperless. And there's going to be quite an educational process instructing people how to move to Clipper cards and other paperless products. So they're anticipating also it's going to save quite a bit of money because of the need to put out all the paper products to a number of different distribution places and then to dispose of them once they are returned for usage. The next item is a relook and in many cases restructuring of our route system for the entire system, and that also has not been done for quite some time. And they're looking at the ridership and the anticipated usage of the buses to come up with what they think is the most efficient use of our fleet. And there were a number of items or routes that were eliminated outside of Clayton, some added, but I wanted to really focus on the 2 routes that serve Clayton, because that's certainly of most interest to us and our users here. The good news is Route 10, which services Clayton on a regular basis during the week, was protected and retained. They do see very sustained usage of that route and want to continue that. And also with expected growth on the project route, they do want to keep that in place. There's just slight movement on the first pickup and last pickup at night, moving 3 minutes later in the morning and about 20 minutes earlier in the evening as far as its last stop in Clayton. The last service in Clayton is at 7:25 out at Bigelow and Marsh Creek Road. There's a bus stop right across from the middle school, and that's as far east as the route goes today. Then the good news really is that Route 310, which serves Clayton, or they refer to it as serving Clayton on the weekend, but it really does a turnaround at Clayton Road and Kirker Pass. And I really was requesting that they extend that route to provide better service on the weekend. And that is going to be added to the system. They're going to run 7 routes now on Saturday and Sunday that follow the same route that the Route 10 follows during the week. So it is going to run and stop at the same stops in Clayton and go out to the Bigelow Marsh Creek Road stop 7 times during the day for both Saturday and Sunday. So those items were covered at the monthly meeting. But I got to thinking also hearing about seeing the success and hearing that they were approving the extension of the weekend service, I asked staff to look into the feasibility of extending that final stop out at Bigelow and Marsh Creek Road to go a little further eastward, turning on Regency Drive and going up as far as they could that would still allow a turnaround of the bus to see if they could provide more coverage for that area of town with this focus we've got now on the parking issue at the end of Regency. Staff's looking at that. Apparently they did look at that quite some years ago, but at the time there wasn't a real need for that service, and there was a little opposition in the area to bus service coming through the neighborhoods. But I asked them to please relook at that again, and they'll be coming back with a study that I'll share with the City Council. So those were the developments at our last meeting.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay?
Any questions?
Did you happen to get ridership figures when you said that the Route 10 had consistent usage? Did they describe that in any way?
I can provide all the ridership. Those routes, the main one certainly on 10, has maintained a pretty consistent level throughout the years because it goes all the way down Clayton Road.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be curious.
Yeah. Okay, I can get you the actual ridership figures.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay?
Yeah, I think those figures are put out every month, and it's still, I think, the number one route, or is it the 14 now that goes on over to DVC?
Well, I just focus in on making sure that we can support continued ridership and continued usage of the route, but I'll get you the actual figures with some history as well, so you have something to compare it to.
That'd be great. Great, thank you. Then we do not have any other reports, and we'll move on to item 6, which is public comment. And this is the portion of the meeting when any member of the public can address the council on any item that is not on the agenda. I do have 2 speaker cards, but if anyone else would like to speak, they certainly can. Allison Snow, like to come up?
Hi, I'm Allison Snow, and I've been a Clayton resident for going on 20 years now. And I had some thoughts in advance of what is going to probably prove to continue to be contentious with regard to the parole housing matter. One situation that I think needs to be taken into account is that parolees have the ability to drive. So when we talk about limiting parolees to a park or another area, residential area, it's sort of irrelevant. I can remember working at Washington Hospital in Fremont when the BART system came all the way down to them, and lo and behold, the homeless wound up coming to the hospital for their medical care because it was the end of the system. So I hope that you will think a little larger perspective on what this is going to mean to the residents of Clayton. And specifically, we have a number of retirees in Clayton, and I have 2 special needs children. And I think that given the vulnerability of those populations, and also when you think about very young children who aren't aware of what's going on, I really would like to ask you to step back and have a larger perspective on this matter. We realize that the parolees have served their time, have done their service to hopefully rehab, and that they have as much a difficulty affording affordable housing as we do. But we don't want to actually incentivize, in my opinion, residents and owners of homes or larger homes to have them split up into a money machine. That's a big concern to me when you looked at the potential for someone to earn in the order of $9,000 a month, given what the parole housing, if I read it correctly, was right. Just one last thing I would like to suggest, with all due respect to the very small staff that we have, and Gary and I email very frequently, so I'm very frequently reminded of how small our staff is. We recognize the little town of 11,000. We don't have much staff, and oftentimes it's a good idea to go outside of our own little town and get a little perspective, perhaps from legal and even from people that are on the opposing side of what we are trying to do, which is, number one, keep Clayton safe. That's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Marcy Longchamps.
Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, and City staff. As you all know, my name is Marcy Longchamps, and I reside on Coyote Circle. I am here tonight to speak once again about parolee housing and how it affects our neighborhoods. Although my concerns have centered primarily around our park on Coyote Circle, this issue is going to affect all areas of Clayton. And by all, I mean all of its residents and all of its children. Even the so-called protected areas are going to be affected. Remember, the city of Clayton is less than 4 square miles as compared to Brentwood, which is over 15 square miles, and Concord and Antioch, which are over 30 square miles each. But let's get back to our park. You continue to make us a convenient example in order to satisfy your county and state requirements regarding AB 109. We are talking about children here, the safety of children who enjoy our park every single day. The City of Clayton and the City Council has to take a more in-depth look at parolee housing as it relates to our park on Coyote Circle. Whether it's amending the current ordinance or doing something else, there is no question that a solution must be found that protects the safety of all, and I repeat, all children in Clayton. The time for settling this issue is way overdue. Please be responsible and act now. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't have any other speaker cards, but if anybody else would like to address the council, Ms. Danaway.
Ann Stanaway, again, on public safety. Yes, here I am. Okay, so public safety ordinances. Looks like Clayton doesn't really want to enforce them. So, whether it's parolees, whether it's fire lanes, whether it's handicap parking, gee, Clayton, I wonder exactly how you're going to react to the various pressures that are now going to be put again on the cities. The cities are going to have to respond with some sort of enforcement. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And with that, we will close public comment. Then we'll move on to our public hearings, 7A, which is the consideration of the city's mid-year budget report for fiscal year 2018-19 and the recommended resolution for the mid-year general fund adjustments and trails and landscape committee proposed amendments for the landscape maintenance district. I think we have a report from Mr. Mizuno.
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Catalano. So this is an exercise that we do on an annual basis, typically in the second meeting of February, that meets our statutory prevailing law requirements to communicate our interim budget monitoring as well as our Clayton municipal code requirements, as well as in preparation of the upcoming budget to see if there's any positive or negative variances that are going to impact the current year's budget as well as the upcoming budget that we are going to be planning for very shortly. So the current year, fiscal year 18-19 budget was adopted by the City Council on June 19th, 2018, following a presentation, the meeting prior to that, and a public hearing. And the adopted general fund budget projected total revenues of approximately $4.7 million and authorized total appropriations of approximately $4.6 million. That result was an anticipated operating excess of the general fund of $101,970. It should be noted that on the same day that the budget was adopted on June 19th, 2018, one budget amendment was approved that same day, impacting the general fund operating excess for the approval of the 3-year Police Officers Association, or POA, labor agreement. And because staff and the city council kind of knew that agreement was going to be expiring as of June 30th, 2018, we wanted to be sure to provide some kind of a buffer for that labor agreement. So ultimately that resulted in a reduced general fund operating excess for the current fiscal year of $55,361. So on Monday, February 11th, 2019, prior to this meeting, the city manager, Mr. Napper, and myself met with the City Council Budget Subcommittee, composed of Councilmember Diaz and Councilmember Juan, to review the mid-year budgetary results and all of the information contained in the agenda, as well as to provide any a Q&A session, essentially, for the subcommittee. And the City Council subcommittee was generally supportive of the analysis and recommendations provided herein, with actually some additional input on the proposed uses for the general fund excess, adding another option to the table, which we've included in the last slide of this presentation. So this slide kind of provides a snapshot of general fund revenues compared with general fund expenditures at the mid-year point of the fiscal year. As typical with our city, based on the structure of operations, expenditures outpace revenues, but they are both above the 50% mark, which is normal. And the reason that is revenues and expenditures don't occur in even straight line monthly streams. Expenditures, even last year, we were at a 55.13% of adopted appropriations due to some large one-time upfront costs that the city incurs in the July through fall time frame every single year. For instance, with the prepayment of insurance premiums to the Municipal Pooling Authority of Northern California, as well as for the prepayment of unfunded actuarial liability payments to CalPERS. And we do that in order to realize some savings as opposed to paying it on a monthly basis. So this slide provides a 3-year trend table of general fund revenues, starting with the current fiscal year 18-19 and going back an additional 2 years at the mid-year point. And generally speaking, revenues are on target at 51.65% of the budget compared to 53.09% last year. And it should be noted that last year, as we discussed in the subcommittee meeting as well, that was kind of a statistic that stood out. Last year it was a little bit higher than normal because the Contra Costa County Auditor Controller's Office was having some operational challenges that year, and as opposed to getting our 55% allocation in December that we always get, we got basically a copy and paste of the prior year's revenues. So luckily I got a letter before that money came in, so I didn't have a heart attack reading the number that it was flatlined. Then thereafter in January, they provided a secondary true-up payment for the first installment, which actually brought the first installment to about 63%, which exceeds our normal allocation by 8%. So that's why last year's is a little bit higher of a bump. And kind of a couple variances to point out, looking at some significant revenue line items, is you can see that franchise fees are a little bit lower compared to the prior year. And looking at the information provided by Comcast, who's the primary cable provider in this area, they are just declining, and our understanding is that users are slowly switching from a cable-based service to more internet app options similar to Hulu and Netflix, and that ultimately does impact our franchise fee. And that's not just the city's a risk that the city of Clayton is experiencing, but that's nationwide, that everyone's kind of feeling right now. So we will continue to closely monitor that, but we wouldn't expect that to go that's not a surprising statistic at this point that it's lower. The other one is that business licenses are a little bit lower than they were last fiscal year. However, if you look back 2 years to 16-17, it's about equivalent to that. And also this year with the implementation of our online business license module, local businesses and contractors from based outside of the city conducting business here can actually apply and renew and pay entirely online. And because of that process, we waived the renewal fee to streamline the process and make it more easy for businesses to comply. But ultimately, those two negative variances or downward trends that you see are more than offset by the positive variances we have in the secured property taxes accounts, revenue accounts, as well as in the sales and use tax line items. So this is a similar table, a 3-year trend table, but looks at the expenditure side of the equation for the general fund. And likewise, it's also on target, as we talked about, stable at about 55%, consistent with the last year. This basically tells us that appropriations, as approved, the legal appropriations as approved by the City Council, are being controlled. There are 2 exceptions at the line item level that we discuss in the staff report that we're summarizing on the next slide as well, that we are recommending budgetary action at this time. So the first variance that was identified in the review of the mid-year budgetary results is in the general maintenance or public works department, as we sometimes refer to it as, that it basically accounts for the costs associated with maintaining our neighborhood parks, so not the Clayton Community Park or the Grove Park, those have separate accounting cost centers, as well as city facilities, so including City Hall and our courtyard. So we are proposing to the City Council a budgetary appropriation amendment to increase appropriations in that department by $34,000 as a gap fund measure for some overages for the controller system and communication issues with the new City Hall HVAC and boiler unit. So the City Council recently approved a notice of completion as recommended by the one of our department heads involved in that project, and the contractor for that project did complete all of the work as outlined in the specs. However, once it was going live, it was identified that some controller communication issues were lacking in the specs, unfortunately. So we're confident, talking to our maintenance supervisor and our new maintenance, relatively new maintenance supervisor, I should say, that this will be sufficient to cover those charges. The second item, the only other item that we're proposing appropriation amendments in the general fund is in the community development department to increase appropriations by $18,000, and that is to address additional costs associated with a complex code enforcement case that required an independent hearing officer, as well as special legal services costs that aren't included in our normal operating retainer with our city attorney. So the adoption of these 2 proposed general fund budget amendments would still result in a balanced budget for fiscal year 2018-19 with a revised operating excess of $12,361. So there was sufficient monies in the excess that was included in the adopted budget to address those 2 items. So the following slide provides a summary of mid-year revenues for our restricted use funds, which are primarily our special revenue funds for restricted revenue sources and the city's capital improvement program fund. So overall, the results of these revenues are in line with the adopted budget. There's no alarming negative revenue variances that really need to be pointed out, which is great news on the revenue side. Looking at the stormwater assessment district, typically those revenues at the mid-year point are always at the quarter of 25 to 20% level, because we don't receive our first installment of that revenue source until March, typically. The only primary revenues in that fund right now, financing operations, are reserves up until the midpoint, and then our street sweeping fees with our franchise agreement. The second item to point out is that the Measure J fund, accounting for restricted street monies, is only at 10.6% of revenues, and same thing with that fund. That's not an unusual variance because those revenues aren't received until after the fiscal year end. So on a normal basis, we would get those every single October after the fiscal year end. Moving on to expenditures of our restricted use funds, this provides kind of a snapshot of where all the funds stand at the mid-year point. And similar to the general fund, expenditures are being controlled in the scope of the adopted budget, with the exception of a couple items that we're going to outline in the landscape maintenance district, where amendments are being proposed. And I should add, actually, just to clarify, the expenditures of the landscape maintenance district are actually being controlled in accordance with the budget, but the TLC, the Trails and Landscape Committee, comprised of appointed citizens, actually had some expansion projects that they wanted to add to the scope of this year's budget, which we'll address next. So some things to point out here, some variances are the HUDA, Highway Users Tax Account, gas tax fund, as well as the new SB1 RMRA gas tax fund. Those revenues are both slightly under than we would expect for the adopted budget. However, the HUDA gas tax fund is explained because even though two of the city's large street improvement projects were completed in the first half of this fiscal year, that would be the 2018 Neighborhood Streets project, as well as the Keller Ridge Collector Street rehab project were completed. Those were designed to be funded by in the order of most restricted to least restrictive funds, which is in the best benefit of the city. And because HUDA was the least restrictive funds, and because both of those projects were completed under the budget that was approved in the adopted 18-19 budget, there are additional reserves available, which is a great thing. And once we start compiling and starting the process to prepare for next year's budget, as well as the 5-year rolling CIP budget, that means that there's additional local street monies that can be allocated and redirected to other needs of the community. Similar to that, the RMRA gas tax fund primarily was designed to fund the Pine Hollow Road upgrades project. However, talking to the city engineer and looking at the timing of when federal monies are going to be available for that project that are going to be passed through CCTA, the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, as part of the OBAG 2 grant funds, that project is likely going to be rolling into next fiscal year, so fiscal year 19-20. So we wouldn't expect the RMRA expenditures to significantly rise at this point beyond the 25%. Then moving on to the Measure J fund, as well as the Capital Improvement Program fund. You can see Measure J is almost fully utilized, which is a great sign, and that's because of the two significant CIP street projects that were completed in the first half of the year. So at this point, we would expect to utilize 100% of the appropriations that were authorized for a project, which is great. That means that progress is being made on goals and objectives for this budget year. And then in the CIP fund, it's already at 57% of adopted appropriations. Another significant project that is in the planning stage at this point, that we expect to hopefully go underway in the next half of the fiscal year, is the El Molino sewer system improvement project. So the following slide summarizes some of the recommendations that are being proposed by the Trails and Landscape Committee, so what we refer to as the TLC. So the TLC met on January 28th, 2019 to review the mid-year budgetary results of the Landscape Maintenance District. And there were 4 additional projects that they were proposing to staff that we add to recommend to the City Council for inclusion in this year's budget. The total appropriations for these additional projects was $350,000. The first was $100,000 for additional tree trimming above and beyond what's in the scope of the current operations, which are all on the city's 3 arterial roads, so Oakhurst Drive, Clayton Road, and Marsh Creek Road. And the second project was $100,000 for median island landscaping on Marsh Creek Road from View Lane out to Regency Drive, so out to the that would be the entry point on Marsh Creek Road, that arterial road. They also recommended $100,000 for the clearing of dead brush, as well as trimming and thinning of brush along the creek areas and trails. And then the final and fourth project that they recommended we include in tonight's presentation is $50,000 to upgrade the landscape maintenance district's irrigation controllers to wireless remote capabilities. So the LMD, or Landscape Maintenance District, opened the current fiscal year with unallocated reserves, positive reserves of approximately $764,000, which would be the funding source for these four projects. And even after removing the $350,000 being proposed for these four projects, there's sufficient reserves for operational cash flow purposes, which is good news. And one thing I would like to add in addition to this is that these are kind of figures that the TLC came up with, looking at the reserves that were available, as well as working with staff that was attending that meeting. And any approval of contracts or specific legal contracts with people to perform this work would still have to go to the City Council for adoption and approval, because they exceed the threshold, that specific threshold outlined in the procurement policy. So these would more likely than not be coming back to the City Council unless they were entirely performed in-house, which for some of these it's unlikely. So I would expect more input to be provided on these projects at a later date. So the final slide summarizes some options that staff has compiled, working with the various department heads for potential uses of the fiscal year 17-18, so last fiscal year's general fund excess of $181,500, which is a number that is essentially above and beyond savings in our normal operating budget that's available to be used should the City Council direct for needs of the city. So we outlined this prior to the budget subcommittee meeting. Staff had met together and brainstormed on various needs of the cities based on operational requirements, and we outlined options A, B, and C to the budget subcommittee, and then the City Council budget subcommittee actually had an option D that they preferred, which is kind of a hybrid of option B that we'll get to. So the first one is the simplest. Option A is to keep the excess in the reserves, which would essentially result in the $181,000 staying untouched, available for emergency purposes, any urgent needs that wouldn't be addressed by other funds that are available. We always talk about the hypothetical landslide or something that could occur, and that would result in general fund reserves of approximately $5.3 million as of July 1st, 2018, so to start this year. The second option proposed by staff to the budget subcommittee was to supplement our internal service funds, and that was to place $50,000 of the excess into the self-insurance fund, which is used to address our risk exposure for non-insured losses. So our deductible for insurance losses is $5,000 in most instances, and it helps to cover those issues. And that fund has gradually declined, as the staff report outlines more in detail, over the last several years. I believe it was about $37,500 to start this fiscal year. And this would basically be to replenish it, to bring it back up. And then the other $50,000 was proposed to be placed into the transfer to the city's pension rate stabilization fund, which is designed to kind of stabilize. It acts as like a hedging tool to uncertainties with our pension contributions, because we don't know what's going to happen down the line, if CalPERS changes assumptions, if the amortization rate declines again, or if the market declines and they have to recapture the funding from the employers and employees. So that is designed to kind of help stabilize fluctuations. And then if that ultimately results in about $81,500 remaining in reserves, which results in a revised unallocated positive reserve in the general fund of $5,202,751. Option C is to fund various departmental requests, which are listed in detail on attachment 3 of the staff report. One thing to point out with those is, yes, they do exceed the $181,500 in excess. That's not to say that staff is recommending we use all of those be approved. It's just it was for the city council to consider which one of those were the highest priority, if any, and approve action on those items. And then option D, as we talked about up front, is the hybrid option proposed by the city council budget subcommittee, which was to basically take the two $50,000 transfers to our internal service funds and combine those into a $100,000 transfer into the city's pension rate stabilization fund, which currently has about $168,000. So it would bring it up to about almost $300,000, shy of that, so $268,000. So with that, I will pass the matter back to the mayor and the city council for discussion, questions, and action.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any clarification questions of staff?
Just
Councilmember Diaz?
a cosmetic upgrade. Why on slide number 6 is that blue or green and then you have orange? Why aren't they both upward pressures?
They're just, there's no really.
It's a style.
Yeah.
What I'm used to seeing and all that. So, I would just make, if they were both upward pressure, which I assume they both are, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Then why two different colors? And that's just me.
The simple
Other than
answer to that, that's a great
an excellent
comment, yeah.
meeting, an excellent report, and a great amount of staff work that was gone into in great detail, and I really appreciate it. That's all I have.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a good point. There's no reason for that, so
Yeah.
I will incorporate that in the next one, definitely. It's part of the template.
Don't take that too seriously. Anyway.
Great,
Thank
thank you. Any other clarification questions? I have a couple, just a couple of questions. So I did notice, not a question, well, I guess it's a question, on the general fund revenues. I guess if you look at the building permit fees, it looks like those have kind of gone down for the last 3 years as well. So I don't know if that's an indication of that we're just having less of our homeowners are doing less projects. Or is that not significant enough of a change?
I would have to run the metrics on that for the quantity, because it could be a combination of things, the size of the projects, or if it's the quantity of the projects. I think at year end, we actually ended in line with the budget last year. So it's possible. You're right, though. At the mid-year point, it is lower. That could, I would need to look into that and get back and talk to the planning department.
Yeah.
And see if if it's because of a wet season, maybe it declined. One possibility is we know last year was a pretty rainy season throughout, which was good for the water reserves, but both this year and last year are less than 16-17, where it was a little bit more dry and there was more construction activity going on. But I don't think that's anything as far as looking at the full fiscal year ends that indicate there was a scary downward trend by the end of the year.
Right.
But we'll monitor that. That's a good point to bring up.
And then the other question I have is on the Community Development Department modification. So apparently there's been one time-consuming and cost-consuming enforcement case, and I'm wondering, do we have any potential cost recovery on that? Do we have, or is that matter still pending? Is there ability to impose penalties? I think oftentimes you would want to try to recover costs in enforcement actions, but maybe it's still pending and you can't comment. But.
We love cost recovery, but in this case it's not available because the code indicates when our municipal code indicates when there is a code enforcement issue and it goes to appeal, the requirement for the independent hearing officer, that expense is to be borne by the city. and therefore each party, other than the independent hearing officer, shares their own legal costs. And so it just shows how tight our budget is. All it takes is one particular code enforcement issue that's complex and protracted, and it can cause the budget to go up, the expense side.
Okay. And then my last question is on the 4 recommendation from regarding the landscape maintenance district budget. So the last recommendation was for $50,000 adjustment to upgrade the irrigation controllers to make them wireless. And I'm wondering is the idea there that the $50,000 investment there to make them wireless will then result in savings, whether it's labor or water cost or something like that, or is this just sort of preventative care to upgrade the systems that are?
It's all of that, Mayor. Actually, I did wanted to provide a comment. $50,000 does not get us all of the controllers wireless. It probably should say to continue to upgrade. However, our controllers, the irrigation controllers are quite old, they're antiquated, and what we've been trying to do over the last several years is to upgrade them. They're very expensive to upgrade to the latest technology, but in doing so, as we do those upgrades, we can now make them wireless, and so our maintenance department, as you visualized, can, whether at home or, if it's during off hours, depending upon weather patterns, can cycle those programs off or on without someone coming out, responding on overtime, picking up the service vehicle, and then going back out. So over a longer period of time, it will save, and it will make us more water efficient as well.
Yeah. Okay, great. Those were all my questions. So why don't we open up for public comment? I don't have any speaker cards, but if anyone would like to comment. Sure. Go ahead, Ms. Stanaway.
Okay. Ann Stanaway again. The upgrade to the irrigation controllers to wireless is a really good idea. The big savings you're going to experience is going to be when they configure alerts on those wireless controllers, because then the alert system will email or otherwise alert the maintenance personnel at home at midnight when the jets start spouting out and you end up flooding Clayton Road. They'll get out there faster, okay? So you really want to go wireless.
Great. Thank you for that comment. So with no other speakers, we'll close public comment and then bring it up for the council for discussion. Who would like to start?
One comment on the list that are on attachment 3. I just want to follow up. I did make a contact with the president of the CBC regarding the potential for adding an AED here in Hoyer Hall for $2,100. So I've got to file some paperwork with them just to let that is moving forward, hopefully.
Can I have Mr. Napper?
Yes. Procedurally, just a thought, Mayor. Where the staff is seeking 2 actions tonight. One is to approve the mid-year adjustments, and that is by a resolution. And then the second item, you might take a little more dialogue, but determine if you want to expend any of the general fund excess from last year.
Okay. So I mean, we could certainly take the resolution first, and then if there's any further discussion on the $181,500, then have a discussion on that. Is there a motion for the resolution by anyone?
I'll move on it.
I'll second.
So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the resolution to amend as recommended the annual operating budget of the City of Clayton for fiscal year 2018-2019 as indicated in earlier today. All those in favor, please say aye. 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 And opposed? Seeing none, so it passes unanimously. So then let's bring it back for the discussion on the general fund excess, the $181,500. Any comments? Go ahead, Councilmember Juan.
So when Councilmember Diaz and I met with staff, we went over the options listed here in attachment 3. There was a showing of each department made a showing to say what they could use the funds for. Ultimately, I don't think it was pushed very heavily in that while these are all worthwhile items, it made more sense to us to make a recommendation that wasn't listed here on attachment 3. And that was what's on the last page of this deck, option D here. Both the internal service funds of the city, the self-insurance fund, we thought if there's a need, it's not a difficult thing to allocate the incidental cost as they arise, but the greater risk that we saw was for the pension rate stabilization fund. And so of the 181, we recommended 100 of that to go towards the pension rate stabilization fund. And given the resolution that we just voted on that amended or reappropriated additional monies, the remainder 81 going to the general fund, and that brings us back to approximately or close to what our initial budget was projecting. And at the midpoint, I think that's a prudent course of action. So that was our recommendation as the budget subcommittee.
Okay. Any other comments? Vice Mayor Prius?
Yeah, first I want to thank the subcommittee and staff for all of their work getting this ready to come to council. I would also agree with the recommendation to put $100,000 into the pension rate stabilization fund. I think that's a really prudent investment because there will be fluctuations as soon as PERS does another analysis. Of the 81.5 left, I do think that there are some things that we need to look at. Personally, I think the $2,100 for an AED for this room is a prudent expenditure and should be made as soon as possible by the city. The city is the primary user of this building, and therefore it is a responsibility of the city to pay for that expense. And regarding the other things suggested here, I understand that there may have been a way to find money for painting the interior of the police station. Is that correct, City Manager? Okay, so we found a way to pay for that with other funds. And no slight to you, Kevin, but I think the 2 requests by Finance could probably wait. And since we haven't expended what we already have in place for the archiving of the electronic records yet, maybe that waits till a further action 6 months from now or something like that if that is necessary. Regarding the community development suggestions, the first one, the consultant services for implementing SB 743, this is something that has a window and must be completed by July of 2020. I've had several discussions today with our staff at the Contra Costa Transportation Authority as well as with our city manager, and I understand that our community development director attended some of the workshops put on by the Contra Costa Transportation Authority about how this needs to go forward and some of the rules and what needs to be included as we update our general plan to include the change from level of service to vehicle miles traveled. This is something we've been working on at CCTA ever since this legislation was passed a couple of years ago. We've had several presentations at our meetings about it. Our staff has been doing an extraordinary amount of work on this. And while they've done several seminars for our countywide planners group, which our community development director did attend, they are going to do one more, at least, probably within the next couple of weeks, to work on some best practices and perhaps a model ordinance that can be customized per each jurisdiction. Each jurisdiction is going to have a different traffic study and that sort of thing, so there is going to have to be some customization and that sort of thing. We can't just have one ordinance that everybody adopts that matches. We've done that with a few of our other ordinances where our elements, where we've got, like our transportation element is largely a template. that was adopted by the central county cities, and we pretty much swallowed that whole, and we're good with it. This one requires a little bit more, but in talking with them this afternoon, they think it's very possible that they may be able to give us enough extra support to make sort of a comprehensive, consistent model across the county that we each customize to what we need for our individual intersections and projects and that sort of thing, that it may be able to cut that cost way down. It may not be that much. I don't think it's a bad idea to reserve that much just in case. But I think that's a good place to put some money. I also think, and this goes way beyond the 81,000 left, that we need to get moving on the streamlining of our permits. That's another one that we need to get done as mandated by state law. I don't think that one's going to take a whole lot of work, and indeed Mindy has indicated here it's somewhere around half the cost of what she's projecting the other one to be. But it is one that's going to need to be done, and I think we need to pay attention to both of those. So my recommendation would be to give direction to staff that we buy the AED right away, and then we proceed ahead to work on both of the community development requests.
Okay.
Can I clarify or ask?
Go ahead.
Clarifying question.
Councilmember Juan.
Are you suggesting that we appropriate funds for the 2 community development items listed here? Or, because this is to engage with outside consultants to assist us in preparation of these materials. So I wasn't clear if that was what you were suggesting.
Go ahead.
To respond through the mayor, my suggestion is, because I think in talking with our Contra Costa Transportation Authority staff, that their help may be able to help us get at least the first one, the SB 743, cost down significantly. Don't know how much. We won't know until we find out exactly how much we can do uniformly and how much we have to contract out for. I think this is something we will have to contract with a consultant for. It is a bit beyond the scope of our traditional planning work, and it's going to need some specific expertise in modeling and that kind of thing. So, but what the cost would be, it's kind of pull a number out of the sky right now. I think it'll be less than $75,000, but it'll depend on how much customization we need to do. I do think we need to go forward with both of them and start getting some costs together. The 743 number will come as probably within a month or so. We'll know how much more we have to do beyond what the authority can help us with. So I do think both of those are important, and I realize that pushes over that 81 very likely, but I think it's something we're going to be forced to deal with, or we're not going to make the deadline by July of 2020.
Okay.
So, not to belabor the point, but so you're not suggesting that we appropriate the funds then, but that we have staff continue to work to flesh out what the figure would actually be? So not an appropriation though, because I think that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, okay. I'm saying, well, whether you say you're appropriating it or not.
Like we're authorizing the spending, essentially.
Right. It'll have to come back when we let a contract anyway. That will have to come back to us to approve, right? Correct. So until we know what those numbers are, but I think those are the priority I would like to indicate as being something we should target that $81,000 toward.
Okay. Councilmember Wolf.
So just a point of clarification then, wouldn't it be prudent for us then to not allocate the $100,000 to the stabilization fund and just hold the money until we know the figures that you're talking about for 743? Or can we come back to that? If we were to hold the 181,000 until we know what we have, wouldn't it be prudent to do so?
I mean, money is somewhat fungible, but to the extent that we have this looming unfunded pension liability, I think it's prudent for us to aim towards making additional contributions every year, somewhat like a savings account. And because there's an excess, that seems like a good place to go. It doesn't prevent us from eventually, if we all collectively decide we need the money right now to do something else, we could always use it, but it makes it a little bit more difficult because then we'd have to make that conscious choice. And given that our reserve status is fairly healthy for these types of things, I think it's in our best interest to set aside funds for the, to cover our pension costs.
So we're going to, we're looking at 100,000 appropriated for the stabilization fund, and the 81,500 that's left over, are we going to leave that in the reserves?
I think the subcommittee recommendation was to put that in the general fund.
Correct.
But obviously, the whole $180,000 could be split any way. It doesn't have to. The remainder does not have to go to the general fund. It could go to some of the items on option C list, for example. So it's a matter of preference for the council.
But we're talking about covering the consultation for 743, right?
That's one option. So I guess what would be your position?
Well, I would just err on the side of caution with regard to the 81,500. If we don't know how much the consultant services are going to be, I think we need to look at how much those are going to be, and keep that money in reserve.
And that's what the recommendation is. By designating it in a general fund, it's essentially reserved for future appropriation as necessary.
Okay.
I have one final comment, because I concur with Councilmember Pierce on her recommendation, and specifically as it relates to the AED. I still want to pursue the CBC, maybe reimbursing the city for that expenditure, and see if that flies. But number two, there's one already in the library. Could it be moved to the foyer and put there, and somehow we could have access to it during city council meetings? That as a question.
Mr. Napper?
Why is it locked up inside the library where we can't get at it if we needed it?
Well, in many cases, the AEDs are put in places where they're not accessible to the public. So, which sounds, counterintuitive, but there are people that like to play with them, usually not of a height above 4 feet. So, the one in the library is actually in their office area behind the counter check-in. So we could relocate it, but then that means they would have, if we put it out in the lobby, there's people that would come out in the lobby. I actually think, and my thought was this came to my note when we had the wildland fire, most recently, out in Morgan Territory Road, and the American Red Cross was in here, and the library was not open, and I was thinking, as we were going through the checklist with the American Red Cross, one of their questions was, do you have an AED in this particular room? And I said, well, we have one over in the library, and they said, that's not good enough. It has to be in the room in order to be a sanctioned evacuation center.
And I understand that, but I don't want to upset their process of doing things, and so I think it's best that we just proceed and get one for Hoyer Hall, and then I'll try to seek reimbursement from the CBCA, because they seemed, at least initially, to like the idea. Anyway.
Great, thank you. So let me make a couple observations myself. So I do agree with respect to the two different funds, the service funds. I do agree with the subcommittee in that I think the self-insurance internal service fund based on the annual draws that it is, they're fairly low, and I think it still has about 6 years left, so I don't know that there's a huge necessity to put anything in that right now. So I would agree that whatever we put in, we do put into the pension rate stabilization fund, and I do think it's a good idea to put something into that fund, given what's happening overall. In terms of the option C list, so it sounds like the more urgent or more immediate needs are the AED and whether or not we get CBCA to reimburse it or not. But it is a city building, so I would definitely, and it's not a huge expenditure, so I definitely would be in favor of that. And then, I mean, I do agree, especially in the SB 747. I mean, given that the deadline is coming up in July 2020, that's not far away. And hopefully the actual expenditure is less than $75,000 if we can get some help from the county in some form of template or other work. So I would be supportive of those community development appropriations as well, given I think we just need to get those done. So that would be my, so I don't know if it's a matter of making the appropriations for the AED and the 2 community development items and then putting the rest in the pension stabilization fund, or what would be the most appropriate? And I'll ask Mr. Napper, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. A couple of thoughts. The AED, we wanted to, daylight the fact that there's, it's missing this facility. We'll go back and look at the, police budget or something and find the monies to do that. And if CBCA wishes to be the donor on it, we'll put a plaque on there, donated by CBCA. So the community can see it. This room is highly used. You have 2 options with the remaining in the community development department. None of them are ripe right at the moment, as I think everyone is indicated. And presently, those monies are already in the reserve. Part of the exercise here is to highlight for the City Council what issues are pressing down the road. So there's 2 thoughts. Number one, you could appropriate monies from the reserve, and you could make the SB 743, make it $46,500, and then keep the SB 35 at $35,000, recognizing that we'll need to come back to you with firmer costs. The other is basically the same road. We'll need to come back to you anyway, so just leave them in the reserve and understand if we do come back and say we need monies for, SB 743 after CCTA has completed their CEQA analysis and so forth, because we will need to take whatever modeling they have and update our circulation element, which is one of the approved elements, required elements, in the city's general plan. SB 35 right now is a little bit of an exposure for us, because that's already law right now. It defaults if we don't have any objective standards. Then someone, in larger cities, they're already being pressure pointed to come in, and basically if you don't have any objective standards, the project's essentially approved without local input. But neither of them do we have any firm consultant costs to do so. So those are just my thoughts. You can appropriate the monies or not, or I'm comfortable enough knowing that it's on your radar now that you would not be surprised if we've already been given instruction to go out and you find some consultants, and then we bring it back to you. You're not surprised that we need monies from the reserves.
Okay. Any further comments? Or is there a motion?
I think the latter is probably more prudent, sans any specific information. So I think that's consistent with what you were recommending.
And I would second that with just one comment. I believe the AED, you have signature authority for that amount. You could just buy it and get it done.
Correct.
Thank you.
Go to Amazon. Have them there.
We'll get it done. If I might, just the exercise is actually, which we have before you, it has several benefits. One is to allow the department heads who are cautioned all the time, don't overexpend your budgets, because then maybe some monies might be available for one-time expenses. And number 2, it gives me an opportunity as well as the council to learn from the department heads what is pressing. And so actually, while we have a couple of matters, this list is not terribly bad.
No.
I mean, if we're talking about an AED of $2,100 being identified as a need with a budget of, 4.2 or $4.3 million, we're doing pretty well in terms of meeting our needs.
The list has come down considerably in the last few years. We've been doing a very good job of chipping away at a very long list.
You have.
Okay. This sounds like, are we leaning towards then putting $100,000 to the pension
We
rate?
have a motion from
Do we-
Jeff already
Was that
to
that was a
do
motion?
that, and
Okay.
I seconded.
Okay, good. So we have a motion and a second, so that is to put $100,000 to pension rate stabilization fund and the rest into the general reserve, and then with the expectation that some of these items will
Stays
come
in the
back.
general fund, right.
So it's been first and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes unanimously.
And Mayor?
Yes.
I'd just like to make one other comment. I'd just like to really thank staff again, and that's everybody on staff, but particularly Kevin and our city manager. They do an amazing job of making a very small budget cover a lot and keeping us always in the black. We have never had to worry about that. There are some other cities that would love to be able to be in the kind of financial condition that we are in. And I just, congratulations and thank you for all your hard work. And that goes to every department head, everybody else too. Thank you so much.
And to further continue that, thank you also. The reporting and the staff report we have is very clear and easy to understand, so it makes it easy for us to read the report and understand what's going on. So appreciation for that as well. So then let's move on to action items. We have none. Then item number 9 is any council items. Are there any requests or directives for future items?
Just a reminder that the 5th of March will be the presentation by the county organization headed by Laura Delaney and company.
Great. Any other requests? Okay, good, thank you. And then closed sessions, we have none, which means we are adjourned to March 5th, 2019. Thank you.
Wonderful.